Oh no, we're going live. We're not live yet. We are live now. Hey everybody, how you guys doing? I hope you guys are coming on in. It's a nice cold day outside and join us. We have a special guest in the room today, and we'll get to him and all that he has to share. Author, educator, what else you want to add to that?
Wow,
inspirational
writer,
speaker.
Yeah, speaker.
You know, section chocolate. I call it section chocolate, you know. Say I'm just making blush or make them blush. Anyway. Poor Will.
It's whatever, man. It is what it is.
I'm the minority in the room today, so I still have to, represent. Okay.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Well, Mink was busy.
Mink was busy. I know you got life.
Mink got kids and all that other good stuff going on. I think her husband's birthday and then her birthday, so they might be doing. I hadn't talked to her, so I think they just doing. Other than her telling me she couldn't make it today, but anyway, so Mink, hey girl, we miss you. So we're going to start off this live today, or this episode today. We're going to start off talking about something that is near and dear to my heart. You see my shirt. It says Stand with Bennett. If you've been following the YouTube page, you've seen the videos and the posts that I've done about Bennett College. I'm an alumni because it's an all-girls school, so we're not alumni. We're alumni of Bennett College. And honestly, for me, I wouldn't be the woman I am without Bennett. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have been successful at another school and all of that, but I know that what Bennett did for me, and I know how Bennett made me just a better person. I was raw when I first got to college, like straight DC, whatever. And what are you laughing for?
Because that's what everybody says. I'm straight DC. Whenever
straight DC.
Whenever we show up anywhere, I'm straight DC.
Straight DC,
Straight DC. It's what it is. What I am.
You know what I'm saying? And I mean, what's going on with Bennett is we are in danger of peril, if you will have better word.
Good word.
Of losing our accreditation. Without accreditation, students can't get federal loans, and pretty much it's just a death. It's a death sentence. You've seen other schools like Morris Brown and other HBCUs that lost their accreditation. So we need to raise $5 million by February 1st. And the campaign's been going on for a minute. I know that we're probably, I said I know and probably in the same sentence, but if I had to guesstimate, I would say we're well over half of that. I know February 1st it's not that long away. It's 2 weeks away. If you can give anything, we have a Cash App. You can text. You can, old fashioned, just mail a check. It's tax deductible. Everything you do is tax deductible. So in the description box, I will have all that information. But I know, let me just go on and say it now. So for those who might be listening, if you want to text it, you text BELLS, BELLES to 44999. That's real easy. Cash App is $ Stand with Bennett. $5, $10, $20, it all adds up and it helps. Bennett is a historical Black college started by 50 slaves in 1873. And it became an all-girls institution in 1923. And I mean, it's a very rich history. It's something we were talking about offline, where we were saying, unfortunately, a lot of times with HBCUs, they rely a lot on their history instead of, giving you what we are now, where we are now. But just a few statistics, 70% of all of the doctors in the United States went to HBCUs. Bennett has over 6,000 alumni throughout the globe, globally, all parts of the world. And we have extended programs in, continents like Africa and Asia. So it's definitely a place that I would send my daughter. I went there and we just wanted to be preserved and saved. There's a rich history in historical Black colleges that is unfortunately being lost because that mindset sort of after segregation, and you can just chime in on this, the mindset that white is right. And now that we can get in, now that Harvard will take us, or, even just the state school will take us, it's like, oh, well, they must be better. And so you forget about the rich history and all that there is to give. But I mean, that's that mindset that PIWs, are going to give your kids something that a Black college won't. So I don't know. I've been talking. Anybody want to add their 2 cents about HBCUs, or just, I know you are a graduate of HBCU. You want to speak on your?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just find that HBCUs, I think, are pretty essential in the development of Black students. I mean, you're talking about people talk about your formative years being like, real early,
Mhm.
but to me, it's really that 18, 19, 20,
Definitely.
21, that time period, you start talking about your formative years. And I think that HBCU goes a long way in kind of instilling in you a certain level of pride, certain level of
Definitely.
understanding who you are, where you are, and not to say you're not getting a good education.
No,
So like a lot of people think that's all it is about HBCU, the history, the culture. No, that's in addition to
right.
The
I mean, the
education
education. I know for myself, I feel like it was second to none for
Right.
myself. I know I got a lot. Oh shoot. Do me a favor. We live. Hit the remote. My bad. The TV just did its own thing. You could just do it that way. That's perfect. Sorry about that, y'all. When you live, you can't help it. Shit just happens. So hey, you just move with it, roll with the flow. So yeah, I agree with you that definitely, you get a reputation, the Battle of the Bands and Homecoming and all that. Right. But it's so much. It's just
it's TV.
Right. You know what I mean? That's what gets on TV. But the education, I know for myself, the sisterhood, these are women that, we've gone through births and deaths and weddings and divorces. We've been in each other's weddings. We've traveled together. You know what I mean? There's just a bond that is there, that is built in those 4 years or however long you were there. I have friends that went to Bennett that didn't graduate, but still feel connected, or they transferred for whatever reason and they still feel connected. It's a bond that is there. So I know you didn't graduate from an HBCU, but any insight? I know you partied at them. I'm just going
way to put that out there. No, I didn't graduate from an HBCU because I decided to
serve your country.
Yes, I do that. But from a HBCU town.
Yes, we are.
Because there's one of the more
well-known
Howard,
Morgan down the road,
all of that.
Coppin. Yeah.
So yeah, I've been to many a party. Met Diddy and Biggie and Total. Everybody else when they came through for homecoming.
Right.
It was great. But everybody talk about the towers and all that good stuff. It was kind of like you get to walk down the end of Georgia Avenue. And you could see, black men and women getting educated. And it was, even though they went in with this, I guess, jeans and t-shirt.
Right.
They came back out, suit and ties.
There you go. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And just to see it, like, the media will have you think that we're not doing these things.
Right.
That we're not getting an education, that we're not investing in higher education for ourselves and for our children. And I know for me, I went to a white high school. And so to go into a HBCU and be in a classroom just full of Black scholars, with the mindset of education and learning. How did I manage what?
White high school?
What do you mean how did I manage it?
I'm sorry. I did too. So
I almost got put out a couple of times, I tried to arrange a couple of protests. The nuns was like, wait. So, but that's another story for another day. So that's my. I'm just saying we could go down that road. We go down rabbit holes a lot. We start talking about one thing and then we be over here. I'm trying to because I want to get to our guest today. So please, you guys, whatever you can give. They're doing a Bennett-a-thon right now over on YouTube with different Bennett bells are going live in hour increments to just talk about Bennett, their experiences. So please, you guys, just whatever you can do, whatever you can give, whoever this touches, $5, $10, $20. Hell, if you got a nice little inheritance, going to drop us 100, 200. I know people are furloughed and there's other stuff going on, but if you can, please do. All right, I'm excited about our guest speaker for a lot of reasons. One, because he's a really good friend of mine. We go back, way back, educators. Two, because I love his brain, how his mind works. We have great conversations when it comes to topics of, Black history and culture and what's that big word you just used a minute ago?
Afrofuturism.
That's it, Afrofuturism.
Right.
He introduced me to Octavia Spencer. I was not, Butler. Damn, that's the actress. Octavia Spencer is the actress. Octavia Butler. Woo, Lordy. He really did introduce me to her, though, y'all. I messed up the name, but he really did introduce me to her. Octavia Butler. And he has a book that I I'm excited about. I was happy for him. I remember him talking about it. And so when the project came out, so tell us a little bit.
This up. What is this book?
He's about to break it down for you now. Tell us about your book because
I've been in the dark.
Face is a comic book head.
Okay.
And so I kept telling her, I was like, I'm not going to tell you, but I know you'll be interested once he gets to talking. So break down your book. First of all, the title alone makes you go, boom. All right.
So my name is Will Jones. And among other things, like it was already stated, educator, writer, public speaker, and so forth. And I specialize in the history of Black folk in the U.S. and I also have a company called Afrofuturism Network. And I wrote a book called The Ex-Con Voodoo Priest Goddess and the African King. And it's basically a history and an analysis of Black comic book characters.
So see if you could break down who he's talking about. So who's the ex-con? Black comic book characters. Who's the ex-con?
Luke Cage.
Yep.
All right. What's the next one?
Ex-con Voodoo Priest.
Who's the Voodoo Priest?
Dr. Voodoo.
Most people think it's Dr. Voodoo. I'll give you another hint. Think Constantine.
Right. John Constantine. And wait, I can't think of his name right now, but
I don't know.
John Mahunsu played him. Papa Midnight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The Voodoo Priest. What's the third one?
Goddess.
Well, you know Goddess. X-Men.
I mean, I got it, but it was like I was like, just in case he was trying to throw
you another
one. Throw me
No,
you got it in my head.
You got it. Storm, and then the fourth one.
African King.
Well, we know the African King.
T'Challa.
Yeah, Black Panther. That's it.
All right. So, okay, break it down. So we got that. Boom.
So, basically,
I'm upset with myself.
Like I'm mad at myself right now.
Most people don't get that one. They think Brother Voodoo or Dr. Voodoo.
Yeah.
Because Voodoo Priest or whatever.
Well, it's because like he's out more.
Right.
As opposed to Papa Midnight.
Right.
Like unless you read John Constantine.
I'll be honest, I don't know.
Or seen the movie.
This is Greek to me right now. I don't know who Constantine is. I don't know who Papa Midnight is.
Or the show. Yeah. Like you wouldn't even know.
What movie was that Hunsu played him? I don't know.
It was called Constantine. It was
Keanu Reeves. It was a movie called
Keanu Reeves played him.
Yeah.
Oh.
But he played him. People didn't like it because Keanu Reeves had black hair.
Yeah, he didn't look the part.
He's not British.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay.
Whatever.
Well, essentially, basically what I did was looked at the history of Black comic book characters because I'm a comic fan, I'm a history fan, so it gave me an opportunity to put them both together.
Okay.
And this is something I've always been fascinated by, just the imagery of Black folk and the way it was shown in that medium. So I just traced the history and I analyzed those four characters in particular, and I looked at, in terms of drawing parallels between the way we're represented in comics and the way we are treated in the real world. So I looked at like the first representation of a Black character in a comic strip around 1895, 1896. It was in a comic strip called Yellow Kid. It was just a stereotypical Black character and so forth, exaggerated features. And that's around the same time you got Plessy versus Ferguson. So the idea is we're being marginalized in the real world, we're being marginalized in pages of comics.
Right.
So you just kind of see that progression through these comics and you say, wow, as soon as this happens, I'm noticing these things are happening in the real world. So that was the thing that struck me. And also in looking at the four characters, I dealt with the question of voice because, a lot of times folks get excited simply because there is a Black character, but then you got to ask yourself, who's giving that character voice? You know what I'm saying? If most of the time, if you have a Black creation created by white writers, what you're really getting is how do white people view you? You're not getting that actual Black character.
Right.
So those are the kind of things I looked at. And I also looked at some of the points that they raised.
Until recently, a lot of the minority characters in comics were stereotypical minority characters.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Like the supposedly the pro-Black Panther, and I can't think of his name. It's a DC comic character. It's on a different planet. Pro-Black, but he was killing everybody. Like it wasn't like he was really pro. Okay. Like he was just Black.
Right.
Right, but he was still.
But he was like Hitler. Like it wasn't like
wow. Okay,
but you know what I'm saying? It wasn't like it was just like
so what still wasn't positive.
There's a Black guy, but he wasn't the.
It still didn't come off positive.
Right.
Got you.
Yeah. So it's those kind of things that I'm looking at. Like if you have a character that's supposed to be quote unquote pro-Black, you're getting it through the filter of what a white person views pro-Blackness to be. So it comes off skewed. So you're talking about what's the brother's name? Legion of Superheroes.
Yeah,
that brother.
It was
he
the
had all white,
yeah,
with the little, they'll come to me in a moment, but
Yeah.
and looking at that, with that character, whether they realize it or not, they were sort of touching on the Maroons.
He beat up Superman though,
right? They touched on the Maroons a little bit with his history and so forth, but they didn't delve into it enough,
right?
So those are the kind of things I look at. So, like the 4 characters, Luke Cage, that led me into research on black male incarceration and experimentation.
And just real quick, your book came out before the Netflix series.
Yeah.
So your analysis is not connected. It's basically it's strictly just the comic book and your research. I mean, I just want to be clear so that people understand that this book was before the show. And I know because like somebody for myself who I don't really read a lot of comic books. What I know about Luke Cage, I learned from the show.
Right.
So me reading the book, I got different things.
Exactly.
So it's unedited.
Yeah.
Right. The show was edited to make it
more
for the masses.
Right.
The comic books, wasn't that nice.
There's no way, like, had they copied what was in the comics, that wouldn't have aired.
Right.
Like, people would have been protesting.
Not at all.
They'd have shut it down.
Not at all.
There's no way.
And
like when you talk about the question of voice, that's when you see the difference.
But it might still be on. It might still actually be on.
Right.
It's straight from the comics.
Right.
So they addressed some of the things that I found problematic in the comic in the show, which I thought was interesting. I looked at the costume of Power Man, the original costume. He's got like this silver band, the vest,
yellow vest.
And for me, that was too close to the image of a slave. This guy had shackles on his wrist.
Yeah,
he had a literal chain around his waist and the tiara around his head
for decades.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was interesting because when I saw the Netflix series, if you recall, he had that on, and he looked in the mirror and said, "I look like a slave," and he got rid of it.
He's like, "This is retarded."
Right?
Yeah, this is stupid.
Exactly. So for me, that's that black director, that black writer saying, "Oh, we can't let this happen.
We're not going to let this.
Exactly.
But we're gonna acknowledge
this
but not allow."
That was that scene where he escaped from jail.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Though y'all seen the first season.
Right.
Yeah. And you're not gonna look at it. No.
and like I looked at this idea of this history, not the idea, but the history of experimentation on black people. Luke Cage gets superpowers out the deal. In reality, we didn't.
Right.
We got shortened lifespans.
Right.
We were crippled or scarred for life, or just died. Right. So it was a great book.
And actually, for the month of February, I teach an AP psychology class.
Right.
We are actually going to be doing a case study and studying the Tuskegee experiment.
Right.
As part of like looking at that from through the lens of a medical field.
Exactly.
And getting into experimentation and the ethics, like all the things we've been talking about, but how that connected, and just because it's Black History Month, bringing that in,
Yeah. So
all right, Sister Chris Rock.
Who's that? Hey, Chris Rock. Hey, girl. All right. Go ahead.
So like that brought me to there's a great book called Medical Apartheid, which outlines the history of Black experimentation on Black people in the United States. The idea that Luke Cage would have steel hard skin, there was actually a myth that if a Black man did cocaine, his skin became so strong that you had to have a high caliber bullet to penetrate the skin, and we became expert marksmen.
Wow.
So around the same time, and I'm not saying this is the reason, but around the same time this myth was being spread, police began to carry high caliber weapons. So
out of here.
It's a great book.
Actually, one of my Bennett sisters wrote a book on female, Black female experimentation. I'll get you the name of it. That just came out maybe about 2 years ago. Dr. Deirdre Cooper.
Okay.
And she got into that when it came to women genitalia and reproductive, and that whole thing. It's actually a pretty good book. It gets from I have to take it in doses because it gets a little technical, but it's a very good book when you start talking about just again the history. But this was focusing more on Black women, and the experimentation, because of course we couldn't have had babies the same way. It clearly had to be different.
Exactly.
Our reproductive was something different. What that say?
There's
a few people coming in.
Oh, excellent.
All right, this is my first time hearing this.
Yeah.
You learning something. Come on in.
Thank you.
You learning something here.
Turn some other folks on too.
That's right.
Chime in.
We're going to put the title of your book and the link in the in the description box, so that people can
I
just
like
click
this.
the link,
Look,
go straight to Amazon and buy the book. We're gonna.
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna have him back again because again, his mind. We'll talk about other topics, but I definitely wanted you to be able to speak on that. So, so with Luke Cage, that's when you got into that.
Luke Cage, I got into that, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in terms of Luke Cage. Please.
I mean, even though I probably just need to read the book,
right?
But Papa Midnight.
Yeah, Papa Midnight was interesting to me because I read the miniseries by Matt Johnson. It's called Papa Midnight. Mm-hmm. And I read the original Constantine comic where he came from. And I looked up Matt Johnson's black writer. And what happened was he was displeased with the way that Papa Midnight was originally written. You know, in the Constantine comic, he's a little bit of an anti-hero, but his story is that stereotypical voodoo priest. Mm-hmm. He's got the top hat, the loincloth, and the tuxedo jacket. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That type of image.
That mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, turns out
what the masses were comfortable with.
Exactly.
As far as the voodoo priest go. Yeah.
And as far as the way he gained his power, he literally sold his sister into sex slavery in the demonic realm to gain more power. He beheads her. He cuts her head off. Oh. You know, and Matt Johnson looks at the way he was portrayed in this, and he's saying, you know, these people aren't giving voodoo its proper respect. They're falling back on the stereotypes. Let me do something about this.
Right. What I understand, voodoo isn't nothing about that.
Exactly. It's a religion.
And all that. Yeah.
Right. It's a religion, just like any other.
Yeah.
So absolutely. He reimagines him in this miniseries, and he revisits his history, and he incorporates Papa Midnight into slave rebellions. His story now goes right into these actual slave rebellions that happened. And so I started to look up and research slave rebellions. What you will find is, in many cases, not in every case, but in many cases, there would be a spiritual leader at the heart of a slave rebellion. It may be from a traditional African belief. It might be Christianity. You look at, you know, Nat Turner.
That was Nat Turner.
You know, you look at what took place in Haiti. That was Boukman who inspired the people.
Right.
You know, you had all these other actual voodoo priests that were part of it. So he begins to analyze and talk about that. So that's what led me into that whole discussion around, well, who were these conjurers that were part of these slave rebellions? Okay. So that's why Papa Midnight was so fascinating to me.
Okay, that had because everybody you name, I'm like, how did he
get the Papa Midnight?
Stop on Papa Midnight?
All
right, cool. I gotta know this.
All right. So what about Storm? And the thing is, I've seen you speak. I mean, he does book, and I would love see more, but. So I've heard part of this, but I'm clearly always intrigued. So what about tell us about Storm?
Storm, that's my girl. There was a couple things that led me to her. First of all, she's one of the most popular, the most powerful characters, period. Black, white, male, female, whatever, developed in the 1970s. You know, and part of the reason why she was created was because when the X-Men were originally created, it flopped. It was nobody bought it.
Right.
It was all white cast, you know, and it was doing so poorly. They just started to reprint the comic.
It's true.
Yeah. So nobody was buying it. So in the 70s, they said, we got to do something about this. So they go back and they reimagine the X-Men. That's when it becomes international. Okay. So you get characters like Wolverine, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Storm from different parts of the world. Because like we got to do something different, right?
All the way redrawn.
Yeah, exactly.
Wolverine.
So with Storm.
In the comics, he's ugly.
No, it's not. I'll be honest with you. I used to now out of all the comics I read X-Men.
Yeah.
That's the only comic that I can say I religiously read. I read X-Men.
And like hands down to this day, it's one of the most popular.
And I would
titles.
And I still think Wolverine is sexy.
Yeah. You know, one of the most popular titles.
He could get it.
You like dude shorter than you? All right. Whatever. Keep going.
It's all good.
That's not a reason to discriminate. It is what it is.
Fair enough.
Right, go ahead. My bad. This is what we do.
It's all good.
Sidetrack.
I appreciate it. Nah, it's cool. But like Storm, what struck me with her was you have this African, Kenyan to be more specific, superhero, and she's worshipped in her homeland.
Yep.
What I found fascinating with her was in Kenya, she was seen as a goddess. And Professor X was going around the world collecting superheroes to make this new team.
Right.
As soon as he encountered, got kidnapped.
Get the break speed off.
Exactly.
Almost
so
died.
I don't find him. And when he finds her, like all the other X-Men that he found, they were in positions in life where they weren't happy. Their life was being threatened. Something was wrong. They said, look, I will happily join your team.
Right.
She was the only one.
She was good.
She was a goddess.
Right. She was revered.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I told you I read this.
He shows up
read X-Men.
and tells her, you're no goddess. You just, superhero mutant or whatever. you need to join me. So the first thing that struck me was this idea that the black character has to give up who they are and their mission and actually demote themselves to join up with your mission. Like nobody does that. Right. Thor was still a god of thunder. Even though he joined the Avengers, did all these other things, he was still treated as a god, still seen as a god.
Right.
You know, she has to surrender her godhood to join up with Professor X.
And they did her dirty twice.
Yes.
Did her dirty twice. Well, I guess what you just said 3 times. Okay. One, worship in Kenya.
Yep.
As a goddess. They spun the story where because she used her power so much, she destroyed the country.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in the Morlocks of it, she won. She became the ruler of the Morlocks.
Yes. Yeah.
But then because she was still doing X-Men stuff, it made her as a bad ruler because she wasn't with the
she wasn't focused on
the most downtrodden of youths.
Right.
Wow.
She wasn't that focused on, and she had to go back and beat the rest of them again.
Yes.
To let them know that she was still the G.
Yeah.
Wow.
Literally in the sewers. Like
literally in the sewers.
This is how far down they were. Yeah. You know, so that's what struck me about her. This idea, and you see this a lot of times in writing and in film, where you have what they call a magical Negro. And if you're not familiar with that trope, it basically is a supernatural or somehow gifted black character that will use their powers, but only in the service of a white character. You'll see this time and time again. You think about, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off because that's actually a question I was going to ask you. When I saw you speak, you spoke on, now I can't think of his name. You know who I'm talking about. Captain America.
Yes.
That's where you were going?
Yeah, all of that.
Okay, go ahead.
Right. So you see, like, for example, Ghost. I don't know how far back your audience goes with their movie watching. You have Whoopi Goldberg, who had a supernatural gift, who's not helping anyone in her community. She ends up helping the white characters.
Right.
You had, what's the one with Jim Carrey, where Morgan Freeman is God. Jim Carrey character, who's, you know, well-to-do white guy, just upset with his life, whatever.
News guy,
Right. Black God gives him his power. Not some poor black man, you know, or some black man going through some struggles where that could have really used it, you know, or any other black character for that matter, goes to the white character.
Because white characters need to learn the lesson.
Exactly. So you see this time and time again with this magical Negro thing. You know, you see it in Will Smith films. He was like a caddy to a white character.
Yes. I know you're talking about the Legend of Bagger Vance.
You know, so you see this time and time again. So you saw the same thing with Storm. So that was the thing that struck me with her. Also, what struck me with Storm is the idea of the black female body, the fascination with it.
Yeah.
When I looked at the early X-Men comics,
most naked.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's true.
So
and we talked about that as well before.
Even more than Psylocke.
Yes. Exactly.
Even though Psylocke was cut, she actually had it was an issue where she just got naked.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in the book, you know,
just because she wasn't used to wearing clothes,
apparently. Yeah.
Apparently,
so in the book,
that's what I did. Kenya.
I show the covers. I show the issue where they just found excuses to
make her naked.
Yeah. So you know, it wasn't like you know, it wasn't Phoenix, who's much, you know, in terms of the X-Men's history, much older than, you know, had a longer history. It wasn't Psylocke, wasn't any of them. She was the one
who died and was never resurrected. But she's still like the hero of all time.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Phoenix,
that's what struck me with her. So that got me the whole conversation of, you know, the white.
We just playing.
He's drinking apple juice. He was like, he said, they gonna think I'm just a lush. He's drinking apple juice. You know, we drinking what we drink. Right.
You know, our unofficial sponsor.
It just looked the same, right? Our unofficial sponsor. It just looked the same, right.
Somebody out there going, yeah, right. But
they're like, nah, whatever.
But so that got me this whole thing of the white male fascination with the black female body.
Right.
So that got me to a conversation with Venus Hottentot, or you might know as Sarah Bartman.
Okay.
We had this woman, real life woman, in Southern Africa, and because you know people were fascinated with her body type.
Is that the one with the butt?
Yes.
Okay, I'm familiar.
Yes, taken back to Europe. This woman was brutalized, raped, put on display, put in a cage, put on, you know, chain, walked around. They looked past the fact that she was just a human being, but this woman was multilingual. This woman was a musician. She was all these great things. They looked past all of this.
It was just they were obsessed with the butt,
right?
With her body.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. I've read on her.
You know,
I've read on her.
So much so that she died. They still put her body on display in a museum.
Right.
And it wasn't until Nelson Mandela became president that they got the remains back. Yes.
Come on, back up.
Yeah.
I'm not heard what you said.
Yeah.
But it was like, wait, he didn't say that? Like,
yeah.
He didn't say, like she was already dragged through it all through life.
Yes.
But even after she died,
yes,
they still basically just stuck her up and put her in glass.
Yeah. She was on display. Yeah. And it wasn't until the 90s where President Mandela, 1990s, where President Mandela demanded they send her remains back to South Africa for a proper burial.
Wait, where was she on display?
This was in Europe. You were seeing
in Europe.
Yes.
Jeez.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
but when you think about taking it to a different level, when we look at
when you die, you still gotta pay.
Right. But when you look at when you look at the obsession with the Kardashians, like they did something. Right. You know what I mean? Now all of a sudden, you see all the obsession with the butts. But that goes back to that whole mindset of the African body.
Years ago. Sorry to my PO. This is way before you. Somebody else I was dating.
Gotta say that right now.
Whew.
Don't get in trouble.
In the comic book store, it was like artists drew a comic. And the heroine, it was black heroine. Right. I was like, oh, black heroine. I looked at it and I was like, and it was dating. So she was like, what is this bullshit here? Because the character was all ass.
Right.
It was the way it was drawn. Everything. I was like, who? We just gonna bypass this?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
But that's but it goes back to the voice when you're looking at. When it's a white person's representation or interpretation, I should say, of the black female body, then you see what they're obsessed with. Then you see what they see. So it's the butt, it's the breast. You know what I mean? Right. And you're right. When you start talking about Storm, you're absolutely correct. Right. That her being half naked or naked, more so than the white characters that you would see.
Yeah. And like with to bring some other recent examples, you look at Serena Williams when he did the political cartoon and how she was drawn. You still have that mindset. And this is, was it 2018? Still drawing us like that? Right. You know what I'm saying? You had in Iron Man, you have Riri Williams, who's also built an Iron Man costume or an Iron Heart costume.
Right. She built it in her garage.
Right. There was a controversy because they had come up with a cover where she was drawn. Now, this is like a teenager. This is a little girl.
Yes.
They had drawn her so voluptuous that social media spoke up and was like, oh, heck no, we can't let this fly. So they actually had to pull back the cover because she was drawn as an adult woman, but she was underage.
Right.
But once again, it's this idea of what do black women look like? You know what I'm saying? So that was social media speaking up.
All right. So speaking of women drawn, because there was another, it was an issue, X-Men issue. Because, another tragic tale of Wolverine. Yeah. And the woman he's dated.
And should have come to me. I'd have treated him right.
And they all showed up. But it's like, in Storm, like this, like Kitty Pryde, Psylocke, Storm showed up. And it was like, and the one that everybody hates, the psychic manipulator, always wear white.
Oh, White Queen.
White Queen.
Yes.
They all showed up. When Storm showed up. But because Storm was portrayed to be just as beautiful as everybody else, there was like a lot of negativity. Like, how is Storm he never dated her?
Right.
Yeah, he did.
He did. He did.
Well, so that's a perfect segue into your fourth character, which a lot of people don't know that Storm and T'Challa were married.
Right.
So your fourth character of your book that you examine is the African Prince, T'Challa, Black Panther, and of course with the popularity of the movie and everything over the last couple of years. Once again, your book was written before the movie. So how you break that down?
Well, Black Panther, the thing that struck me was in terms of his history. First of all, they deal with the question of what would an African nation look like, African country look like, had it never been colonized.
Absolutely.
So the idea that even, you know, the white creators said, you know, white people never bothered Africa,
What
they would be
look
the
like?
most advanced,
Absolutely.
you know, civilization on the planet.
Absolutely.
So that was the first thing that struck me. So I began to look at how other writers in the past dealt with the idea of a space for African people. So if you look at Afro-Atlantica, there's a great bunch of stories about this place where only Black people can exist because the environment won't allow anyone of any other race to live there. So it was this idea of Black people coming together to move to this space.
It was like hot, but it's not humid.
I'm just playing. No, I got you. No, I got you.
I'm sorry about it.
No, I got you.
I keep my hair together.
It's all right. It's all right. It's all right. You know what I'm saying?
Go ahead. You know, it's cool. So I began to look at that in terms of what are they saying, and also the idea that in the mythical world of Marvel, you have vibranium, but they're also telling you this is the most mineral rich spot on the planet.
Vibranium is basically.
I'll be right back. I'm gonna let y'all talk.
I'll be right back.
Sorry.
Oh, Christy Queen. Hey.
Got some more folks.
Right. But vibranium is like basically the center of the Marvel universe.
Exactly.
Well, especially on Earth.
Right.
So, and the biggest deposit of vibranium in the movie, I know y'all seen it.
Right.
Because, you know, it wouldn't have been the movie that it was. Exactly. Y'all had seen it.
Exactly.
The large deposit is in Wakanda.
Exactly.
And it's like, it's like a lot of the stories that were told before the story of Wakanda was told. It's all about vibranium adamantium.
Yes.
Which is alloy. Adamantium, if y'all didn't know, is the alloy of vibranium.
Right.
So,
right.
All of that was from Wakanda when it all came out, even though this is the biggest thing in the Marvel universe everywhere. Everybody using it.
Right.
You know, from Iron Man, Dr. Doom,
right,
to everybody else. Everybody's using it.
Yeah, yeah.
But there was no idea where it came from.
Right.
But when it came from, it was like, but Wakanda was still a sub.
Exactly.
No, in this grand scheme of things until maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, you had that, like when people go to the movie and they see Black Panther on screen, they're looking at Christopher Priest, Reginald Hudlin. Those are two Black writers that really elevated the status of the Black Panther. Right. Now, Black Panther has been around since the 60s, okay? Right. Not named after the group, okay? Been around since the 60s.
It didn't become popular until, like really mainstream, until, damn it, the Phoenix, the new Phoenix saga when it came out, and the X-Men versus Avengers.
Yes.
That's when Wakanda and all of that really like introduced, and everybody really knew about it.
And that was because of, you know, two Black writers, Christopher Priest and Reginald Hudlin. You know, they're the ones that really elevated his status in terms of
Reginald Hudlin of the Hudlin brothers.
Yes.
Nah, you didn't miss too much. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Who's that?
Chris Queen.
Hey, what's up?
So that's when you really, and once again, you know, when you look at them prior to that, white writers were dealing with them, but in some cases they would stop them before they got too deep. Like there's one time where the Black Panther had to support the Ku Klux Klan, and they had to stop the storyline.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it was these kind of things that were happening earlier in this history. By the time you get to Priest and Hudlin, okay, they were able, especially, you know, what Hudlin did, was really able to get to like the political core of who the Black Panther was, you know, who he was and what he was about.
And on a side note, for comic book heads, if you didn't know, T'Chaka's father, beat the brakes off Captain America.
Exactly.
In Africa.
Exactly. And that upset a lot of readers. They had this great scene in that Black Panther run where he's got Captain America slumped over his shoulder. You know, and the response.
I wouldn't mind reading that one. Okay.
You know, and the response that they got from the readers was just ridiculous. You know, so I dealt with those four characters.
My Comixology account. I'll get you my login.
Okay. Comixology.
Yep.
Yeah, so it has all of this online?
Yeah, you can look at
that's what
digital
comics.
comics.
Okay, cool.
Comics,
all right. Because the thing is, you know, for me, I would get lost because I didn't know enough of the backstories. Right. It's a lot of, if you don't know this, and this doesn't make sense, and it got to be a lot.
Right.
No,
if you read Hudlin's run from the beginning, though, it's pretty self-contained.
Okay.
So that's what I liked about his run.
Okay.
I mean, all comic book they reset every 10 years.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Like they do a reset. It's like, all right, we got too many characters, we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna
like that's when we got the DC versus Marvel thing. Okay. Everybody had a fan vote and all that. Yeah, that's when you get.
They start over.
So let me ask you this. Okay, so those are your 4 characters, and that's your book. And say the name of the book one more time.
Ex-con, Voodoo Priest Goddess, and the African King.
By Will Jones.
Yes.
So if you go into Amazon, it is there. It is a great read. Yep. If you know anybody in your household who's into comics, that it's a great read for them. Like I said, I ordered it. That's why I don't have the copy you gave me. I ended up giving it to a friend. And so I need to get another one from you. Because I think anyway, so I didn't get another one. I mean, but I'll pay for it. I think I do have your book. Oh, I should have looked for it. I think I do have it upstairs because I'm maybe not. Anyway, because I'm thinking now, I'm trying to think. I think I ended up giving it away. I will definitely buy some more copies because I definitely want to. Because again, anyway, that's a whole other.
Because I want to read it, and I'm gonna give it Don Pablo so you know the difference between
right Marvel and DC. It irks him when people cross.
Oh, don't know. Yeah,
it irks his. Yes. He'll be like, he's like nobody gonna say nothing wrong because we're like we're in a group chat because we all are in football league together. Right. So we're in a group chat.
I had a good weekend because I won like 3 times this week and football.
Well, I didn't win nothing anyway. But he was just like, so y'all ain't nobody gonna say nothing about what he said. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong.
He watched the Reign of Superman.
Okay.
And he put in a group chat like, "Hey, Reign of Superman was pretty good for all you Marvel fans." And when I happened to see it, I was like. It was like hours later. Nobody said anything.
I'm like, so y'all just gonna let him.
Ain't nobody gonna say nothing about us.
Right.
It's blasphemy.
Yeah.
Blasphemy.
That's the thing. Folks don't get it. Like if you mix the 2 universes,
you cannot.
Yeah, comic book fans be like, no.
You can't do DC, Marvel, Image, Vertigo. You don't mix them up.
I go like if I somebody say, man, Aquaman tight, but the Hulk would beat him. I'm like, no, they're not in the same. It's not happening.
This would never happen.
Not happening.
It just wouldn't happen. So let me ask you this before we're going to move into some other things, but before we come out of the comic book world, I want to ask you. This is for my own edification because when with Stan Lee, when Stan Lee passed away, I did a YouTube video, just basically a rest in peace type situation. Right. But I learned a lot about. And not to put him on a pedestal, and I know that's why I'm asking you. But I learned that Stan Lee did a lot as far as going against the grain, as far as creating a lot of black characters and all that. So can you speak a little bit on Stan Lee's legacy? Because I think that a lot of people don't, not just black people, but a lot of people don't respect or like when he passed. I mean, you heard the usual suspects saying something, but I even said something on my Facebook, and like I said, I did a whole video on YouTube about it, basically talking about what Stan Lee was to black comics and to social justice and speaking on it. So can you just touch a little bit on that a little bit?
Well, like one of the things folks got to keep in mind, like people celebrate the Black Panther today, right? And say, Marvel doing a great job. If you look at Marvel's history, they always didn't do a great job representing black people. Because it was Atlas Comics before it was Marvel Comics. And it was another incarnation, even earlier. They had some very stereotypical representations of black characters. You had like Whitewash, was a black character who fought alongside Bucky with the Young Allies, stereotypical look, so on and so forth. You had a lot of stereotypes. There were attempts to try to have more balanced characters. 1954, you had Waku, Prince of the Bantu, which was like similar to, but not the same as the Black Panther.
Reference as hell.
Yeah,
I'm like, wow, Bantu and Atu. I'm like, okay, I am learning today.
So you go back to 1954. You had this book. We had this thing called Jungle Tales.
That's before any of us was born.
Yeah,
Jungle Tales. But I think it was
people I do read.
It was a documentary.
Just not what y'all
done. It came on.
But they on AMC.
Was it AMC? So that's what I learned a lot of. Okay, go ahead.
So you had these stereotypical representations in Marvel comics, all comics, for a very long time. You also had attempts by some black creators to create their own comics and so forth. You had the all Negro comics. This is Orange C. Evans, who's known as the father of black comics and so forth. But to your point about Stan Lee, when he comes along, he's bringing.
It was DC did a stretch of comics. That's where we got Static from.
You talking about Milestone?
Milestone,
yes. There's some controversy there.
I have all first issues.
Yeah, there's some controversy with Milestone.
DC absorbed them, and it was just kind of like
because they were under DC.
Yeah,
but some people speculated that the only reason why Milestone was created was to counteract the Black independent comic movement that was growing in this country. You had Black comic book creators coming together to create an organization called ANIA. Okay.
I heard of ANIA.
Yeah.
I heard of
ANIA.
And
some people believe, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but this is what some people believe, that Milestone was created to undermine those efforts. Because oddly enough, around the same time that ANIA broke up, Milestone was dissolved. And now today,
and they only absorbed 2.
Right, they did. They brought some others over, but Static was the most popular.
We're only here to
Static and Icon
mess y'all up.
Were the only 2.
The biggest 2,
that they absorbed. Yeah,
the biggest 2. You know.
Wow.
And I gotta say this.
They had a big comeback. It lasted almost a year.
Yeah.
Event. The
crossover.
Was? The
crossover.
What
was it called? Clash of Two Worlds or something like that.
Yeah, no, it was a crossover. It was like only 2 made it.
Yeah.
After all of that, there was some great characters that Milestone created.
Right.
Great.
Right.
It's okay. I'm just being quiet.
Now you know how you feel on most podcasts.
Right. When we're talking about like Real Housewives of Atlanta, he'd be like,
But anyway, I'm sorry.
No, and I can't say that. Once again, I'm gonna get to your Stan Lee question, but this led me to this other thing where you have a great group of Black comic creators that are now putting their work out there. And I can't say enough about these guys. I held a comic convention of my own. I've gone to several Black themed comic conventions. They just had one in Harlem, New York, Black Comic Book Day.
Can I get on the list?
I got you.
Just to
And folks out there that if you're looking for,
I didn't know you had your own. You didn't call a sister.
Yeah, I did. I did one out in Virginia, and it was Afrofuturism Network.
I get that.
So I got you.
I mean, my bill paid. But I done told you.
Like he don't know me like that.
But he told me. I told you.
At least he know now.
You
know, I actually know the comments.
We could have rolled out.
At least he know now. I actually know the comments. I still on the brother Voodoo question, but he knows
everybody
now.
does.
Everybody knows now that I actually read comic books.
Right.
Period.
So like, if I just get just to shout some of these other comics out, because these are Black comics, Black owned, Black creators. You know, you got EXO, which is you got this Black superhero coming out of Africa. You know, it's unique studios, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. You got the Tuskegee Airs, which is a play on the Tuskegee Airmen.
Right.
Okay, for the modern age. You have Kid Comics putting out some great stuff. You have so many different comic book companies now being run by Black folk. And if we can spend billions to put Black Panther over the top, let's go find these guys. You know, they have BlurredCon, you know, which I've attended on a regular basis. You have Afro Comic Con out in Oakland. I had the honor of attending. Like I said, you have so many Black comic book conventions.
Afro Comic Con.
Afro Comic Con. You got the Black.
Is that once a year?
Yeah, they just had one this past fall, and I helped them plan the first one. They just had the second one and doing another one. You got the Black Speculative Arts Movement. There's different campuses where these things are being held. So for those that are looking for a way to support, because another piece to this, you know, comic book thing, the economic piece.
Right.
You know, these are Black entrepreneurs.
Money, yeah.
And you know, that are creating these comics and so forth.
Money talks, bullshit runs a marathon.
You know, so yeah, so help these guys, help these men, help these women.
Okay.
New Jack City.
So let it go.
Actually on that, a Fat Boy. I know you're gonna see this.
Fat Boy on here?
We've been trying to put a comic together since ever. My story hasn't changed. Wait on you, Slim.
Right, because Fat Boy can draw, right?
Yes, he's the illustrator. He is the illustrator.
Right.
Okay.
So get it together. You have resources now. You have a resource that can get you to a resource that can get you to a resource. I'm saying. Let's make this happen.
Let's get it started, Slim.
Let me be the executive producer.
Yeah. You know,
I ain't mad at you. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So yeah, I just wanted to shout out those comments, and there's several others. I can't remember them all,
right?
But they're out there. You can go online.
But understand that there's more than just Black Panther.
Yes, more than just Marvel and DC.
There's more than just Marvel and DC, and definitely
there's been many more.
Yes.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. So with Stan Lee, we hold him. Yeah. I mean, is it legit to hold him in high regard?
I would hold him in regard in the sense that he certainly introduced or helped to plan. Because another thing that people oftentimes will debate is to what extent was his role in creating these characters when you got Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby and so forth. They were all kind of coming together. So with that creative core, you do have characters like the Black Panther. You do have a character that wasn't even a superhero that appeared in Spider-Man, Robbie Robertson, who was just level-headed, intelligent black man that went against all the stereotypes that you would normally see about a black character.
He went against J. Jonah Jameson.
Right. Who's
he went against J. Jonah Jameson.
Right. So you had those types of characters. You know, many people look at the way he would fashion the whole X-Men storyline, talking about civil rights.
Right. I always connect Stanley with X-Men. I mean, I know it was a lot of other, but for me, that X-Men connection, you know, which
can be problematic because, you know, in the beginning, you telling the story without us being in it. But, you know, but there is that civil rights element to it. You know, you got the philosophies of King and X and so forth.
Can I say this? Can I say this? But about Stanley, he wasn't shy about talking about the mistakes that they made early on. Like he wasn't shy about saying,
acknowledging that,
like it wasn't like we did it wrong, in the beginning, like so I can respect him for that. Like it wasn't like he didn't try to brush it under the rug or like or whatever. Like he acknowledged it, so you know, I give him that.
And then, like, you know, a lot of the black characters that were created in the 70s, that was a direct response to what was going on in Hollywood with the blaxploitation films. So you had, you know, Luke Cage was nothing more than Shaft with superpowers.
You know, that's true. You're right.
You know, Misty Knight, you know, that's Sheba Baby, you know, Cleopatra Jones and all that. So that's another reason why he had that explosion. Okay. Luke Cage, robotic arm.
Yeah. I remember it now. Sorry, y'all.
Lemonade was a popular drink, and it still is. Come on, Slim. She had the saying in the when she was in the. Come on, son. That was classic. Classic.
So those kind of things, you know, were happening, and certainly, you know,
rewatch Luke Cage.
Better hurry up because they canceled it. But
you got 2 seasons to watch. You watched the first one.
I watched both seasons.
Okay, then that's it. So you good. That's it.
That's I knew you were talking about. So that's, I don't remember everybody's name on the show.
Did you watch The Defenders?
The memory needed to be, you know.
You know what? I started The Defenders. I didn't finish The Defenders. I kind of fell asleep on it.
Okay. All right.
Why both y'all were like,
and we looked at each other first.
Like,
this is her show, though. This is her show.
I mean,
it was like we can't do nothing.
I'm not saying I fell asleep because it was boring. I'm saying I was sleepy and I just never went back to it. So.
I got you.
Anyway, all right, cool. So again, we're gonna put all that links. We're gonna put all those links in. We're definitely gonna have you back. So today is the observance of. It is not Martin Luther King's birthday. Okay. It is the observance of Martin Luther King's birthday. And as somebody who is a scholar of history as you, and I'm also a political scientist, my question, we're not besmirching anyone, we're not disrespecting anyone, but just to acknowledge and let's talk about the legacy of Martin Luther King, the myth versus the reality, right? The man versus the myth. Because one thing that, and there are a couple of really great books out. I don't want to start naming books because then we'd be in book. But a couple of great books are out. And there's actually a great documentary that was done. PBS, I'm sure, will rerun it. If it's not already being rerun or being streamed, I'm sure they'll do it. Where they sort of picked up the civil rights movement.
PBS? It's been on since 10 a.m. Trust me.
I'm sure. But they picked up the documentary and they sort of got into that second wave of the civil rights movement. And they talk about prior to King being assassinated and then go into after the assassination. And they talk about his unpopularity. And they talk about how at the time they show us a scene where King was in Chicago. He was actually heckled and bricks were being thrown at him by Black people. You know, he was not revered at his death. And so, you know, just a little bit of the myth versus the reality of who. I have a few things to add to it. I did a program this summer that talked about the civil rights movement from a grassroots perspective. And it was great. I mean, it was like I could go down. I could get, oh my gosh, it changed my life. Like, and I'm not even bullshitting. It changed my life. Like I was able to meet anytime that whether it be comic books, history, music, whatever. Anytime you're able to meet your heroes,
Right.
And I've met people this summer who I've read about.
Okay.
You know, I had a chance to. I'm familiar with Professor Hassan Jeffries, who out of Ohio. He's a Morehouse brother, and he's a very revered historian. He has a podcast. I'll get you to it, but. People, I've loved him. I've seen him speak, you know. So, but to hear I talked to people who were in SNCC, people I've read about.
Right.
So just to have these conversations and to learn about, these are people who knew Martin Luther King, who knew John Lewis, who, you know, you see pictures of them and you're like, oh shit, that's them, you know. I mean, a lot of them actually live in this area. A lot of them live in the DC area. So with that being said, from how you teach your class, how you share with your students, how do you address or how do you speak on the myth versus the man?
For one thing, I deal with the fact that I'm sure by the time they get to high school, they're probably tired of hearing about it.
I do the same thing. I agree. I do the same thing.
And for me, I personally believe that's not by accident.
No.
Because what happens is when you introduce to Martin Luther King, the story never changes.
No.
All you get is, I have a dream. You know, you get a little bit about Rosa Parks, the march, the boycott, then he's dead.
Rosa Parks.
Right.
But do the same thing with Rosa Parks.
Right.
They don't give you the whole how active she was politically before any of this. And how this wasn't the first time she had been arrested for not. So like they don't even get into that, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying. So the first thing I do is I talk about the frustration that you probably have just in hearing about him, because when I introduce him, it's like, oh, here we go again.
Right.
And then even when in the college courses that I taught, there's this idea of I know all about him.
Right. I know everything.
I know everything.
Tell me nothing.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's the first thing I deal with, the fact that I know that's what's happened, because it happened with me. You didn't even want to deal with him.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So you got to go back and revisit and start talking about those things that are not talked about. His triumphs and his and his losses,
which are important.
Because he wasn't Black Jesus.
Exactly.
Right.
So those are the things that we have to deal with.
Which I think the movie Selma, far from perfect, but I think the movie Selma attempted to address the failures and the shortcomings of him.
Right.
Right. The Black Panther was in that.
Yeah.
Shut up.
so that's the first thing that I deal with, and then in terms of dealing with him. Now it's time to put him in the historical context. Yes, sir.
I mean, I have a question.
Sure,
y'all are historians and y'all know the history, and y'all know way more than I would ever hope to fathom.
I don't know. A lot of pressure right now.
You know what I'm saying? Right. You know what I'm saying? Put me on the spot. Okay.
Well, you don't know me well, but you do. Come on, man.
Go ahead.
But like, with Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, and that's what we're holding on.
Right.
And it's like, who is the leader now? Because it's like,
isn't that the universal question? Right?
There isn't one.
Because it's like,
nor should there be one.
I mean, I'm not saying, I'm like, well,
I don't know if I agree with that.
But here's my point. Right. Like, here's my point. Everybody's like, well, who's like for the Black community?
Right.
Who's the number one for this and that?
Right.
Can we do that for entertainment?
Right. Sports, right?
Because there can only be one magical Black person
right.
in any category at a time.
Right.
Thank you for being here, because I could not put that into a phrase until you got here.
Thank you.
Because I was trying to figure it out. Thank you, Will, for being here. There's only one magical Black person in any category at a time. Right. But it's like when something happens,
right?
It's like, all of our leaders that we know from back in the day show up.
Right.
And then it's like, well, wait, where were you?
Yeah.
Before this happened, and then you should put it on us to try to move forward. But I'm like, well, where was the education?
Right.
Or the belief? Because, I'm sorry, to be a leader, stand up front to that degree, takes a lot of courage.
Yes.
A lot of courage and a lot of understanding, a lot of honesty, a lot of vulnerability.
Right.
Right.
Because your life right or wrong, or whatever you've done is going to be on display,
especially today.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
I mean,
Malcolm couldn't have survived. Malcolm X couldn't have survived in today's environment. They would have done so many stories on his back, you know, when he was a criminal and who he met in jail.
Right, they'd have been
mama,
exclusive interviews with his cellmate.
There would have been memes about his perm before and after.
Exactly.
Right. The 10-year challenge.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
But you're right. But there's a lot of people that would not in this, and I think that's part of our problem is when we crucify these people in this society, it's hard to survive.
But I guess my question is like, do we even respect history?
No.
As it is, and even bring it forward to even do like. Because I'm like, well, when somebody asked me, like, questioned me about discussion on Farrakhan and Million Man March. I know it's different than what we just talking about right now. The Million Man March and all of that.
We just talking.
And all of that and what have you. I'm like, all right. I'm like, you know, and all of that, and everybody's like,
right.
Yeah, but he has, you know, he's being dragged through now because of, you know, statements in the Women's March in DC this past week and all that, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, the person talking to me, I'm like, all right, well, what's your idea?
Right.
Or are you willing to put skin on the table? Or who is out there to put skin on the table to move this forward?
Right.
Because Farrakhan, I mean, I've known about Farrakhan since I was
a baby.
Mm-hmm. So he can't be young.
Right.
So he can't be carrying it forward. Right. So
no, Farrakhan is not young by any stretch of the imagination.
Who has a name? You know what I'm saying? Right. Like to Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and everybody else. Like to right now, like who has the name? Well, who's willing? Like everybody have a soundbite.
Right.
Get it right, because everybody's giving high fives to Cardi B right now.
Yeah.
Because of what she said, and she said it to the level of what she could say it to,
right?
To the audience that
to
the audience that she used to speak it to,
right? Valid,
so I'm not mad at her,
right? Exactly,
because she had something to say and she said it,
valid.
But overall. Like, where are we? And it's like...
Well, the reason why I said that I don't think... When I said, well, there isn't one and I don't think there should be one, I guess because they're so... When you look at the civil... And I know this is a monolithic view, but when you look at the civil rights movement, there was a goal. Segregation, integration. There was a goal. We want to get rid of the institutional racism. There was a goal.
Right.
Where we are now, there's so many different levels.
Mm-hmm.
So can there be one person that can speak to all of the different? Okay. That's what I mean by,
I got you.
And it's not that now we can find that superhero, great. But even looking at Obama, there were people, I spoke to people who thought that the minute Obama was elected, he was going to be riding down the street just throwing money, reparations. Right. You know what I mean? Right. And when he didn't do that, then it was like, I mean, look at Tavis Smiley and West, Dr. Cornel West. But where the fuck have they been for the last 2 years?
Right.
But they was on Obama's ass. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Where was they at the 8 years that Bush was in office?
Right. But that's what I'm saying.
Where were they?
It's like they started a podcast, a weekly radio show just to dog out Obama. But where the fuck they been for the last 2 years?
Right.
You know what I mean? So when I'm saying like the first people to pull you down are going to be, and I still ain't figured out what Tavis Smiley beef was. I still ain't figured out what your problem is. No. And so that's what I mean by should there be, because there's so many different areas to attack. There isn't any one.
Okay. To your point, so now it's everybody in any group is all over the place.
Right.
I agree.
So it's like, because I was an asshole last week.
You were.
On a group, we were just discussing stuff, and I was like, well, it was the LB, there's a Q in there.
LGBTQ.
Right.
It's some more letters, but just leave it at that.
Right. And then, we're just talking at the bar. I'm like, and it was the baker guy. The baker and somewhere in Middle America, whatever, that decided he was was a baker or Florida.
The one that wasn't going to do the cake for the wedding.
I think it was a cake. It was a cake.
Because that went to the Supreme Court.
That was
do the cake for the wedding.
Thing. Right. He was on that. Right. And it's like, is that the goal? Because I asked the question because I wasn't in the entire conversation. I heard it. I was trying to eat my fish sandwich.
Right.
But I was like, is that the goal?
Right.
Is that your goal, to force small business owners to bake you a cake? Because he didn't stop you from getting married.
Right.
I don't know where you live, but I'm pretty sure there's another baker somewhere that could made you a cake.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, what is it like? Is that the goal?
Right.
Like, what's the goal now? Like, it seemed kind of small. I thought it was equality for you to, like for on a high level to legally get married and be recognized and to get all the tax benefits and all of that that everybody else enjoys.
Right.
But I think that it's because, again, if I'm gonna put it in the realm of the civil rights movement, your point is valid. Like, I'm sure there's somebody else that could have made a cake, but I think it's from the point of view of, but you're telling me no simply on the basis of who I am. So going back to segregation, we had our own restaurants. Yeah. We had our own communities,
right.
But it was just simply the fact
that across town, can I get a sandwich?
But it's just simply the fact that you're telling me because I am black, I cannot come into your establishment, right? So the goal is to make it. The goal is to set the legal precedent to say you cannot discriminate against me because of my orientation,
right?
You see what I'm saying? Okay. They probably didn't give a damn about the cake in the grand scheme of things, but at that point, it was about. You will not discriminate against me because of my orientation.
Right, I got you. But it was for an event. It wasn't like
it was for his wedding.
Because I was laughing at it because I'm like, this guy has probably made cakes for gay events and not known it. But the point was, once he knew, he said no. I mean, you understand what I'm saying? Yes. So, like, I hear what you're saying, like, in the grand scheme of things, can't you just go somewhere else? But isn't that what they want us to do? Just go somewhere else? I mean, I'm not saying that's right, but it was like, it got to a level of, well, how, like, it got to a level of, like, it was almost more social than it was of what we're trying to accomplish as, like, for our group. Like, I don't know if that even made any sense, but that's in my head. That's how I heard it. I mean, I'm with you. Like, from a business perspective, it's kind of dumb. Like, you're going to refuse money just because, like, it's your business. It's not like they was having a wedding at your house. Like, you know what I'm saying? Right. If it was having it at your house or, like, in your business or whatever, it's dumb to turn down money if you're a business owner. And it's not disrupting your regular flow of business. It was like, he put it out there. Now, the fact that he was an asshole and put it out there, like, to the extreme that he did, and then in the re-up, now it's like, nobody else, and it's like extra people are going to him openly gay, like, hey, and it's like, all right, well, now you're antagonizing the man. But it's like, let him just fail. And
I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with that.
I don't know about because he's not changing the law or anything. Like, in the grand scheme of things, he's not changing or disrupting anything. Just let him die.
So YB the kid said integration messed up the black community. What's your thoughts on that?
I think what happened with segregation was there were two schools of thought. I think the first school of thought was, because society is segregated, we're receiving lesser quality of education, resources, and so forth. Mm-hmm. So when it was separate but equal, it was separate, but it really wasn't equal. I mean, you take any side-by-side picture
I've read something
of a white water fountain and a
the
black
separate
water
wasn't
fountain.
The problem. It was the equal part. Right.
So that school of thought, where you had some black folk that was saying we needed to be in these white schools and so forth, some of them were arguing that we want to be there because you have the better materials.
Right.
If we had those materials,
we're fine where we are. Right.
And the strategy of the NAACP at that time was to sue to make sure that if you built $1 million school for white folk, you was going to build $1 million school for black folk.
Right. The goal wasn't integration. The goal was equal.
Encourage. Right. Because that was at Houston. That was his strategy. That we're going to make sure that if you want this, this is what you're going to do. Now, the other school of thought, which unfortunately I think became de facto, was being around white folk made us better.
Right.
And that, to me, that school of thought
is what got
us in trouble.
Right.
I read something about that. The last thing you said was train of thought. White is better, but the reason why we have like white communities and black communities, because the power brokers and all that, they created this thing where like lenders, banks, and all of that, like the financial institutions, like we're only going to allow black people to be in this zip code.
Yeah.
And so that way the tax money or whatever only will allow for this amount of money for whatever. And then so for the white zip code, like you can live over here, give white people loans or whatever. You can live over here and you get more.
Right.
So better for the education. I read something like about that. And that's how it worked out. Like after like the civil rights movement and all of that. Like, all right, cool. Right. You win. So we're gonna do this instead. And that's where we got the projects from.
But that's kind of what goes back to what I was saying about the HBCUs versus the PIWs. HBCUs produced the best and the brightest. And blacks were these were blacks that could have gone to Harvard, that could have gone to all these other schools, but because they weren't being accepted, they were at the Howards and the Morehouse and the Bennetts. And it wasn't because of lack of that they weren't smart enough. They didn't have the opportunity. So once the opportunity presented itself, that's when you started seeing the HBCU populations starting to drop. Now, there's certain schools that are going to just remain.
Right.
Howard ain't going to never have that problem. You know what I mean? Right. But then the smaller schools,
city in America.
Right. The smaller schools are the schools that like Bennett, and you know, I could keep going down the list, that started to struggle because then that mindset was, well, they're letting us in, and like you said, it must be better because that's where the white folk are because of that mentality that white is right. It was the same thing with the integration of neighborhoods. You know, at one point, it didn't matter whether you were the doctor or the janitor, because of segregation, you all lived in the same community. You all lived together. So you might have been rich, but you were still living in the same neighborhood as the person who was barely making it. But the minute they opened those doors and they started allowing blacks to buy houses in these certain neighborhoods that were, then it was, oh, well, it's better over there.
But it was another code.
If you know any, I always find this funny, if you know any older black folk, they were in the same neighborhood as the biggest stars of their day.
Absolutely.
Like they would tell you, like,
because that's where they had to live.
Like, you know, depending on the age of your grandparents, great grandparents. Oh, I was right down the street from so and so.
Duke Ellison lived on U Street.
Exactly. Because of that, and that also allowed us to see greatness. So if I was a kid and in my home, let's say we were middle income, lower income, or whatever, but I still saw that doctor down the street. That was something that I, you know, could aspire to.
And during my years I was doing sales, I learned there's a thing called the city of and the county of. So depending on the mean income of the family, the city of, the county of, you go through, and it's like, okay, you know, as a minority, like I feel comfortable here, but you cross the street, and it's always a 4-lane street. You cross the 4-lane street, get to the other side. I'm like,
right.
Because I always told people, and me and you were working together when this happened. No, I'm sorry, my bad.
I mean, it's ridiculous of it is. That's what made what I read make sense.
Right.
But it doesn't even have to be like, you know, I don't know, putting a reference to everybody, Manhattan or anywhere else in New York. But it's like, in this town, you cross the street. It's a whole different universe.
There's also,
but look at DC. You grew up in DC. You know that DC could be here. Is the Gold Coast, and you go 2 blocks down the street, and you are in the hood. I mean, that's DC.
But you mentioned the economic
5
component.
blocks from the White House is the hood,
right?
In any direction.
There's also a political component because also keep in mind when you divide up these communities by race, you can also help to ensure when you talk about redlining districts and voting.
Oh my gosh, redlining.
And you're also talking about if I'm a black elected official, you're going to see to it that I only have jurisdiction over black folk. I'm not going to be telling white people what to do. So there's a whole game there as well, not just the economic piece in terms of taxes and yada yada, but also in terms of governance. You know, how does that play out when you have these segregated communities? You know, but I think going back to the question of leadership, I think for me, I do believe that black leadership is necessary because when I look at the greatest gains, if you want to call it that we've had, it was always Black leadership. But I think the problem has been that since the civil rights era, whether we said this to ourselves consciously or not, there was this thing of, I'm not going to be Dr. King and Malcolm X, in the sense that I'm not going to die penniless. These men were not wealthy men, despite all that they did.
Right.
And I believe that the new generation of Black leaders don't want to be that guy.
Gotta have money.
Right. So they want the money too. And what you got to realize is, if you really about that struggle, about that fight, that money may not be there. It may not come. You might be able to get a house, and it's not going to be at the level you think it should
be there, but it's not going to be for you.
Exactly. So that's the thing that I think a lot of why you had that absence of leadership. I think there was an understanding that I'm not doing that. And I think Black folk collectively, when we look at what happened in the 60s, going into 60s on back, really going to the early 70s, we decided we're not doing that anymore. Like, we decided we're not going to suffer to that extent anymore. So I think that what we play it safe to a certain extent.
Yeah.
We take on the issues to a certain point, and then we pull back. We don't. So history, because one of the things that people forget about history,
not happening to me,
right? But history is also a responsibility. So I think you had raised the point of history is not respected. Right. The reason why it's not respected is because if I respect it, then that puts the onus on me to do something about it. So if I act like I don't know it, then I don't have that responsibility.
I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to
hear about it. All you know what's going on.
I got nothing about it.
Exactly. So the more I can ignore it, then the less of an onus it has on me to do something about it. You know what I'm saying? So there's like a willful ignorance that's going on in many of our circles that I'm not even going to participate in the conversation, because the minute I do, now I got to do something.
Right.
And I'm not gonna risk
ignorance is bliss.
Exactly.
So we're gonna wrap it up in a few minutes. So quick questions for you. So today, we had the announcement from Kamala Harris that she is running for president. A lot of people are comparing her resume to that of the Barack Obama, because of course when he first announced it was you don't have enough experience, it's not your time.
Well, nobody can say that anymore after Trump.
Well, after Trump, definitely that should never be, but it was, it's not your time. You should do this, you should do that, or you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that.
I think I'm gonna do what's that presidential thing? I'm gonna do one for me.
Right, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not asking, but what's your take on her running? Do you think that it's her time? Do you think she should have waited? Like, how do you feel about?
There's no sense in waiting.
Right.
Period.
Why wait?
Because
why wait?
Yeah, tomorrow's not promised.
And that a Martin Luther King book, why we can't
wait? Don't wait. If you feel like that's what you want to do, by all means do it. But I do think that there is an order to things. And to me, we keep skipping steps. And try to figure out why we aren't getting where we should be. And I learned, this is not mine. I learned this, from an HBCU.
There you go.
Right. And it was a simple formula that I never forgot. And it was intellectual, social, economic, political, military. Okay. You got to have intellectual change first from within. Okay. You yourself as the individual. Okay. That intellectual change leads to social change. Now that I've changed as an individual, now the community can change because we're all in a similar mindset. Once we had the social changes, that brings about the economic change. How are we going to keep this thing going? We're going to spend money on our own community because we're already thinking alike. Right. Once we have the economics, then we can get to the political change.
We're the last community to spend money in our
community. Right. So once we got the economics together, then we can get to politics.
Yeah.
The biggest thing about politicians that people don't get, no matter how many folks vote for them, they only listen to the people that gave them the most money.
Say it again. Say it again.
You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't really matter. Right now, if you got 100,000 people that vote for this candidate and he or she wins, but you got one guy that gave him $10 million, he listens to that $10 million guy. So the economics have to be in place before the politics can become effective. The reason why we keep messing up and we can't figure it out, we keep getting elected. We got elected during Reconstruction.
Right.
That was like the biggest boom for Black elected officials ever.
But we weren't prepared.
We weren't prepared. We didn't have the economics.
We didn't have the social. We didn't know.
So the political elite didn't mean as much. So granted, Barack Obama, however you might feel about him, I'm not going to get into that. However you might feel about him, trust and believe, he was listening to donors. just like any other politician.
Right.
There is no shame in saying we need to buy politicians. Everybody else does that.
Right.
You need to buy politicians. When you see changes that come about to cable and internet, those are lobby groups that brought about those changes.
I mean, the reason why we can't get anywhere on gun control,
Exactly.
as long as the NRA is what the NRA
Exactly.
is, honey,
you can vote for whoever you
never
want.
gonna get it.
You can vote for whoever you want and their stance on gun control until you have bought those politicians. It won't matter who's in office, you know. And then that political move, because the military is nothing but an extension of politics. So if we're talking about the police or the military and how it's being run, or even institutions and how they're being run.
I feel personal about that. Don't put the police and military together.
Right, I was just saying. But they're
don't do that.
They're not this, but they're in the same family to a certain extent. Okay. To a certain extent, I would put them in the same. It's not a question of liking.
It's not about right. It's not about liking.
I'm not talking about liking.
It's not about liking.
I'm saying they're in that
having that power, that control.
Yeah, they're in the same arena, so to speak. Might be on opposite sides of the arena, but they're in that same vicinity. But the only way that you can start to see any control there or any changes there is through your politicians that you bought and paid for, through your communities that reflect how you think. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So there's a change. So to go back to the question about her running for presidency, I think it's great. She wants to run. That's great. But I don't know that even if she were to win, that we would see the change we want to see because of all the other things that weren't taken care of first.
I hear you.
I mean,
I haven't quite.
That's a long change.
But it's necessary. But it's necessary
right now.
It's necessary.
But the thing is this, and that's again, that goes back to my point about there isn't any one person because we are on different levels. Yes. We are at different places in that. And again, the other thing, one of the things I learned this summer, which I knew.
No, we're not. We're not on the same umbrella.
What happened?
Police is more local.
Okay. But one of the things,
from the,
right? YB the Kid. YB the Kid said you have a great mind. I told him we will definitely have you back. You know,
I appreciate that.
But one of the things I know for myself, we talked about this. But I learned this summer. I knew this summer, but we sort of explored it. Was the idea that the participation of the civil rights movement was like 10% of Black America.
Yes.
It was not, contrary to popular belief,
right.
It was not the majority of Black America was involved in the civil rights movement.
Wait a minute. Every Black person I met marched with King, so I think you're wrong.
Right. Everybody knew King. Everybody was there. You know what I'm saying? I was on the steps right behind you. You ain't see me. You know
right. You know what I'm saying? My cousin called me and I came up. I rode with them.
Everybody was at the right. So, you know, it's important.
That's good.
It's important to understand that this is not, it's not where we are now. People have that romanticized view of the civil rights movement that all the Black people were together. We were all kumbaya. We was all walking the street locked in. We were all ready to sacrifice what we needed to sacrifice. And that is far, far, far from the truth.
I'm glad you said everybody, because it's not just Black people.
Well, I agree. So I
view,
think if people understood that part of the civil rights movement, that is the myth of it, then we would understand that where we are now is not like when you look at Black Lives Matter and people say Black Lives Matter, it was only a few people. That's what it is.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? It took the, and it that mustard seed and it grew, but it didn't.
A few people for corporations change their mind for anything.
Exactly, but it wasn't,
not everybody.
Right, it wasn't the majority. Of that, and it was so much I learned this summer. But that was but those are the types of things, and I think people need to understand that because I feel like people compare and think, oh, Black people are so splintered. Oh, Black people aren't on the same page. We're not like we were in the 60s. We weren't like that in the 60s.
Exactly.
And we need to understand that because I think we hamper ourselves by thinking that romanticized view.
Right. Well, as teachers. To me, this goes back to it being poorly taught. I think that's the issue, that we're teaching civil rights and its history the wrong way. Agreed. So people get the wrong impression.
Agreed.
That's the part where that comes in.
That was the pinnacle of Black history, of Blackness.
Pinnacle, and it was 100% buy-in.
So romantic, just like that whole, even on the white side, it's romanticized. The Summer of Love and the hippies, like that's.
Yeah.
So there's a comment. Here's a comment. I just want to read it. A lot of Black people were against it because they saw how integration would hurt predominantly Black-owned business schools and neighborhoods, etc. And again, we talked, we did talk about that whole mindset of white is right. And the minute The minute I can shop at Woolworths, now I'm gonna stop going to mom and pop, you know. And it was that mindset, you know, which even we deal with today. Look at big business and box stores coming in and shutting down under these small communities.
There's nothing wrong with shopping your community,
but
because walking around the community, I've seen whole communities, even in the council, whatever, like how it's managed in a day is based on the community. Walk the communities. Doing sales on Friday night.
Right.
When the sun went down, you might as well just go ahead and leave.
Right.
Because it was shut down.
Right.
Everywhere. It not only the small businesses, but large businesses that decided to put a shop in that community.
Yes.
Closed.
Right. Because they're scared of their own community. They're not their community.
That's how
they're scared of the people that they're there.
Set up.
Right.
The community that controlled the money that was in that community.
Well, let me just everything I agree 100%, but I also would like to say that we also have to be careful about how we talk about each other in our homes. And the reason why I say that is because if I'm saying that black men ain't, you know how the sentence go, or black women ain't, right?
Mm-hmm. No, that's
you know that sentence go, right? If black men aren't any good and black women aren't any good, then anything we produce won't be any good. So how can a black business be good?
One magical Negro in any category at one time.
Exactly. Right. So how can a black business be any good if the black man that runs it isn't any good? Mm-hmm. How can a black business be any good if the black woman that runs it isn't any good? So the black teacher isn't any good. Mm-hmm. The black professional, the black whatever. So
how do children hear themselves when you say that now? So I'm not any good?
Right. So anything you produce after that is no longer valid. So that too is part of the problem. That's why I was saying you start with the intellectual piece. So in your own homes, if you're validated, then any and everything that you create after that becomes valuable. You know what I'm saying? The biggest issue is when you even when we go into a black business many times, not all the time, but many times we walk in expecting the worst. And we're looking for something to be wrong so that we can complain. I'm sure folks that are listening or you yourself have experiences in a white business where you didn't get the quality of service you should have gotten.
But you keep going back.
But you keep going, and you don't say all white businesses. You say that particular store. Right. I'm not going there anymore.
Or you looking for a discount. Why do we always need looking for a discount from a black business?
Because once again, we devalue.
I've been asked for a discount more times for more things that I've done. I got one small business to the
entrepreneur.
Next. Right. And it's like my business runs on non-black clients.
Right.
Period.
Right. But you got to ask yourself,
I will not survive.
But what did those black people hear? What did those people hear about black people before they got to you? So your mind about a black person has already been made up. And I agree with you.
But here's what kills me. Some people, they know me.
That makes it worse.
That makes it worse.
They've grown up.
That makes it worse.
It's even worse.
That makes it worse.
And they know like what I do, what my mindset is when it comes to it. But it's like, well, around, can you get me?
That can make it worse, though.
No.
Yeah, that makes it worse. Pause real quick. I'm great in the audio. Okay. So we want to thank Will Jones for coming through. We're going to keep it a little bit longer on the live, but we're going to end it on the audio. And again, I will put the name of your book in the description so you guys can order the book.
Oh, can I just tell them real quick?
Tell them.
All right, real quick. You can hit me up on Instagram.
Yeah, give me your social
Afrofuturism Network.
People can't spell that.
So it's Afrofuturism, just like it sounds, Afro, and Futurism, FUTURISM, network.com. You can find me on Facebook. I am right now rebuilding my website, but it is afrofuturismnet.com. Go on Amazon, get the book. I'm also doing a series of appearances. I will be at Banneker High School in the coming weeks as part of Black Lives Matter Week. Okay. I will be at Ballou High School in a few weeks after that. And I will also be at University of Pittsburgh next month. So you can find me. And what the heck, I'm going to give out my phone number. Give me a call, 240-750-7767. And I want to thank both of you guys.
Thank you for coming. And we're going to definitely have you back. Like I said, we're going to end the audio, but then we're going to real quick, I do have one more question that I want to ask you. Sure. I'll upload that in a minute. One more question that I want to ask you, and then we'll go ahead and close this out. As a history teacher, we talked a little bit on how you approach King. I know for myself, when I, we get ready to move into that time, that time of the year, that month. And I acknowledge Women's History Month. I acknowledge Latina, right, Hispanic heritage. I try to acknowledge all of them, but we know Black History Month. For myself, the way I address it, I try to find the things that they never heard about. Like I don't even talk about King. I'm gonna be honest. I only talk about King in the realm of, here's some things that you probably didn't know that you thought you knew. But we don't I don't talk about Rosa Parks, and there's no disrespect. But you got that. I talk about Deacons for Defense. I talk about the Children's March. I talk about things that I feel like you probably have never heard of. So what do you give? Because I know you. I know you professionally. So what do you give your kids that we can throw out there to our listeners that they can Google, they can do some research? What do you throw out there?
Well, first, let me just say, and you already know this, I teach a year round anyway.
Yeah, I know.
Whether I'm supposed to or not.
We know. Right. So yeah, you're right. He don't sing on it, and I do too. I'll be honest with you. I do too. Like, when we talk about when we get into the Civil War, I teach glory. You know what I mean? I teach about the Black truth. But anyway, go ahead. Right.
Couple things that come to mind in terms of resources, I guess is what you're talking about. There's a great
what's up, Red Girl?
book.
Come on, listen.
African American Odyssey by Professors Hine. It's Prentice Hall. I recommend anyone looking to get just that overall history of Black folk, start with that. I think anything by Chancellor Williams in terms of history, I think is great. Destruction of Black Civilization, homage to a lot. Before the Mayflower, they keep adding.
Before the Mayflower is a good one. Definitely
I think that's an amazing book that every house should have. And get the latest volume. Say again?
They meant miniseries.
I don't know.
I don't know if they could because a lot of history.
What is Lifetime doing?
They ain't gonna. I don't know what Lifetime touching that one.
I don't know.
I done seen some stuff they done. I definitely would say Before the Mayflower. Yes.
But Before the Mayflower.
Before the Mayflower, I think is a good starting point for folks that are looking to just kind of get that overview. And like I said, they keep updating it. So they're always adding, the new history and so forth. So you want to get the latest there.
I probably need to get a newer edition. Yeah.
Exactly. So those are just some great ones that come to my mind. I can go on. John Henry Clark is also another one.
Oh yeah. Yes. John Henry Clark.
What?
John Henry Clark. Give me 3 topics, and then we're gonna close it out. Give me 3 topics or 3 things that you teach year round. That the average Black person wouldn't know. So they can Google and learn something new this month.
We are currently reading David Walker's Appeal. Most of the time when David Walker's Appeal is discussed, it's just said it's this guy calling for armed rebellion of enslaved Black folk. Please read that book. It is far more than that. It's a short read, but it's a tremendous read when you look at this man's brain and what he was able to predict from the 1820s, 1830s, going forward to 2019. I think that's a great one. You mentioned Rosa Parks. You got to talk about Claudette Colvin.
Yes, absolutely.
This is a woman who put her life on the line before Rosa Parks got notoriety. And also you look at why she was not celebrated.
Exactly.
I think that also gives us similar, but you're talking about a woman who was a teenage mom or on the verge of becoming a teenage mom.
She had been labeled a juvenile delinquent.
Exactly. And it was even questioned about her physical presence,
complexion. Because Rosa Parks
was like how we trash people now.
Right. Yes. Rosa Parks fit the mold.
Right.
And it's no disrespect to Rosa Parks.
Not at all.
She was the light skinned.
She wasn't the image to the movement that we wanted to do.
The image, right. That's it.
Yes.
But you're absolutely correct. Claudette Colvin. And there's actually a book.
So some things never change.
Danielle.
And I thought I knew anything about history.
And I talk about this offline because I could get on this topic and we'll be on it. But Danielle, God, I can't think of her last name now. And she came to speak with us, but she wrote a book. And this was probably this was a month-long program. And this was probably one of the most emotional days of that program because her book dealt with the exploitation of these women. Going back to, matter of fact, it was a documentary that came on HBO a few months back of how these women would be raped and how they would be treated after the fact and how they didn't get justice.
Right.
And it was a story. Her book talked about, God, none of these names are coming to me right now. I hate when I can't think of it. But her book, I got it upstairs, where she speaks on these women who were raped. One woman was coming home from church. She was gang raped. And how the only reason why her story got out is because her pastor knew somebody who wrote for a newspaper outside of the area and was able to tell her story.
Okay.
And her story got out, and it became a
So
movement.
tell her story outside of where she actually got raped.
Right. She still didn't get justice at the end of the day. It wasn't until it was really, I mean, it was well beyond it meaning anything. But she talked about that part of it and how the women, it starts there and it gets into that whole mindset of the women and how the women were exploited. And she even talks about the women's role in the Montgomery bus boycott that you never really hear about. I'm gonna get you the name of her book. God, I wish I could remember now. But it started off as her dissertation, and that's where it led her. But it was a great and again, it was very emotional because again, we were talking about these women being raped and how they're violated and how it emasculated Black men because you can't defend your wife, sister, aunt, mother. You know, she's gang raped or die. She's gang raped and she's violated in this way, and there's nothing you can do without dying. Basically, I mean, really. And dang, I wish I could remember. I'll try to put that name in the link too. But I'm sorry.
No, it's cool. That's right. The last thing is you asked for 3. The last thing I would say is you're starting to see more and more films talking about the history of Black folk. Right. Don't allow these movies to serve as academic text. If you see something that you're interested in, please, by all means, read more about it. Don't think when you went to see Hidden Figures that was the entire story. That was the true story. They created a white character for that film that did not exist. The guy that went around tearing down the sign, that wasn't a real person. If you're going to see the Green Book, fine. But find out what that book really was. Shut down towns and so forth.
Hold on.
Because I'm not the academic in this. I actually read up on it after movie came out, even before.
Like
I know who these women were.
Right.
Even one more because my background is engineering. So I was like, go ahead, girls. My 2 daughters. No. Daddy, can I watch this? Yeah, we're gonna order this right now. We're gonna pay for this. But
let it serve as a resource, but not your only.
But from what you said, the white person, I'm like that. No.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly.
No.
But focus on the women.
Exactly.
In this movie and
the Green Book, like you said with the Green Book, like that's a whole nother.
What is a Green Book? What's a Sundown Town? You know, if you're gonna do Black Klansmen, know that guy's whole history in terms of what he did, not only against the Klan, but against the Black Power movement. So let these things serve as a starting point. Don't let it be. Don't think because you saw it that's the end all and be all. Is my point. Because there's a whole lot more movies coming out dealing with it.
Well, because now we're making money.
Exactly.
And it's not about telling our story. It's about the fact that people are going to see these movies and they're making money now.
We're trendy.
We're trending. Yes. And so I agree. Professor Hassan Jeffries, who I was telling you, out of Ohio State, he teaches a class actually on Black film. And that's part of what they get into. They get into, the myth versus the reality, how much of this, how you should use it, whatever. It's actually, if I lived in the area of a class, I wouldn't mind like auditing or something like that, just to get, and they do, he said that, when stuff gets a little too deep, he'll put on something fun. A Black movie that's fun. Because it can get deep and these topics can get real. So I just want, definitely, like I said, well, we're not gonna go there either. We're definitely going to have you back. Your mind, people are complimenting you on your mind and everything.
Thank you.
But Will's fun too.
Yes,
you know what I mean? He's not serious all the time. You know what I mean? So we'll get you in here. We'll definitely get you in here again. But thank you guys for coming through. Those of you who commented, who came to, let me make sure I said everything that needs to be said. Of course, YB the kid said that's right, year round. Red Gal, I teach my boys about all types of Black history things the system tends to leave out. Absolutely, and continue to do that. Continue to be. You should be their first source. Because at the end of the day, a teacher can bring it to them, but it has to be reinforced somewhere. And so definitely continue to do that and make sure that I hate to limit it to Black history, but for the month of February, anything, everywhere, and everybody gonna be doing something.
Because I teach my oldest daughter. I mean, she's into all things she's interested in,
Mhm.
because it was engineering and mathematics.
Right.
But a lot of like when there were schools and all that, not about engineering and mathematics.
Right.
I'm like, just hang with me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just
Slam
definitely.
hang
You
with
should be
me.
your
Yes.
child's
You
first
will-
resource.
you will get
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Don't worry about what anybody
Gotcha.
say. Trust me, because I always teach them like be twice as good as anybody expects you to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You don't have to worry about anything else.
Exactly.
Everything will be easy.
Exactly.
Well, thank you guys again.
Thank
We're gonna go ahead and close this out. And y'all have a great day. I hope you did something great on today. You know, day of service. They've turned this into a day of service.
Yes.
So I hope you guys did something. We didn't speak about the shutdown, but please, if you have anybody in your family or friends that are
My wife.
affected, well, your wife, that are affected, if you can give something, reach out, pick up some extra groceries, you know, just do something for somebody.
Yep.
All right, peace.
Peace.
Or just say something nice to them. Dang.
Hit the end. So stupid.